Losing someone or something that you love is probably one of the most difficult things that you'll ever experience. And grief is a natural response to that loss, and recovering from it takes time. In this video, I'm gonna go out on a limb and walk through the uncomfortable topic of grief. So stay tuned to learn about the 9 stages of grief. I'm Cyn Meyer, founder of Second Wind Movement and a life coach who helps older adults achieve their best retirement life with more purpose and passion. The grieving process is a total mess, and if you've ever lost someone, you know that it doesn't simply go through these 9 stages. My personal experience with grief has been this common, tough, chaotic experience. It tends for me to feel cumulative each and every time I experience a loss. The year that this really hit home for me was in 2012 when 13 people I knew passed, which happened to be the year after my dad went through a brain surgery and radiation, which was an equally as challenging time where you take a step back and you evaluate the impermanence of life. It was super confusing why the grieving felt just as heavy each time, no matter how close or distant I was to the person who passed. Then I learned about the chaotic re-grieving process and how these 9 stages are often not in sequential or timely order, and it made more sense. Not total sense, but it made more sense. The takeaway is give yourself permission to feel the pain all over again if you need to, without putting pressure on yourself to just soldier up and move on. If you're someone who's experiencing or re-experiencing the loss of a loved one, I am truly sorry. I hope this video helps you understand the grieving process and that it helps you cope, even if just a little bit. So let's go through the 9 stages of grief, because research does agree that these 9 stages give us a common framework that most people go through. Starting with number 1, shock and denial. This may be the initial reaction to a loss, or it may happen later on, but shock and denial happen where your mind elicits a protective response to traumatic events. You may feel numb, without tears and emotions in the days immediately following the event. It's kind of like you can't believe what happened, or it's all a bad dream. Or you may be in denial and refuse to accept the reality of the situation, which is also a natural way to protect yourself from the pain of grief. It can be super confusing, but it's normal. And this first stage of grief is your brain's natural response that lets you work through your loss at your own pace. You're giving yourself time to process what's happened and to accept that your loved one is no longer with you. So all you can do is allow yourself the time and space without pushing the process to grieve and mourn in your own way with your own individual triggers. Stage number 2 is disorder. So when you're ready, the emotions that you've initially pushed down will start to resurface, which is when you can start to continue your journey of healing. When denial starts fading and that grief starts settling in, this is commonly when you start accepting what happened as true. But it comes with some pain and chaos. Even normal daily routines and simple tasks may be difficult to handle, and this is when you may start to experience physical symptoms like headaches, nausea, and dizziness. So having some sort of structure and grounding practice, like self-care types of activities, exercising, walking, meditating, breathing exercises, and also having a support system that you can rely on is super crucial in this stage. So please reach out to those around you and ask for help if you need it. Then the third stage is when your pain turns into anger. It's not uncommon to feel anger towards the person you lost, or towards yourself, or towards the entire situation. It doesn't matter if you know in your head that it's not rational, the anger still surfaces and it needs somewhere to go. And nothing is rational when it comes to the grieving process anyway. So if you're struggling with anger, these tips may help you. Express your feelings in a healthy way. Don't bottle them up. Talk to someone who understands what you're going through. Find healthy ways to release your anger, whether that's exercising, yoga, or straight chucking rocks into an open hillside. Whatever it is, try to avoid self-destructive behaviors like drinking or smoking your anger away, because that doesn't really work in the long run. The fourth stage is guilt and bargaining. Some people feel guilty for feeling angry, or you may feel guilt because of what you said or what you didn't say, or just because you should have done that one thing and maybe it would have been different. So this is your mind trying to get some sort of control over the uncontrollable, even if it's at the expense of your mental health. When coping with loss, it isn't unusual to feel so desperate that your mind, and then subsequently your behavior, is willing to do almost anything to alleviate or minimize the pain. Losing a loved one can cause you to consider any way that you can to avoid the pain from loss. And some people try to bargain by making promises to themselves or to a higher power. So maybe something like, I'll never drink again if this person is healed, or I promise I'll be a better person if they live. If there's any guilt, don't repress it or beat yourself up. It's important to acknowledge what you're going through and talk to someone that you trust about what happened. And it can also be super helpful to write down your thoughts and feelings in a journal to release them. Or even record a video message for your loved one. Like in any of the stages of grief, the most important thing is to not push down your emotions, but instead let them out, embrace them, and feel them. In grief, stage number 5 is physical and emotional distress. This stage of grief can be particularly dangerous to your physical and emotional health. You may begin to feel a sense of hopelessness that shows up as like physical symptoms like shortness of breath, poor appetite, insomnia, or lack of energy. And it can be accompanied by intense emotional pain and feeling overwhelmed. So if you need it, it's important to seek professional help, particularly at this stage, to get the support that you need and to prevent your health from deteriorating. At the very least, focus on your self-care, and if you need ideas or help with self-care, check out our self-care video to get back on track, which also helps with the next stage of grief. Number 6, depression. The depression stage is, of course, so difficult. This is the stage where you start to face the reality of your loss and the fact that it's permanent. So it can lead to intense feelings of sadness and sometimes despair, which is very natural and normal. And the journey to overcoming this stage is unique for every person. And because there's so many ways to go about it and feel better, there's not a right or wrong answer, of course, except to focus on self-care again and giving yourself that grace, compassion, and love, and knowing that you're not alone in this human experience. Which brings us to grief stage number 7, loss and loneliness. When you might feel like you're the only one who understands what you're going through, and that might be true because it's your own unique lens and your own unique experience. So that loneliness that comes with loss is real. As difficult as it may be to try to fill that empty space with constructive instead of destructive ways, which means reaching out, whether it's seeking support groups or counseling or leaning on your friends and family for support during this time, is hugely important. Just try not to stay isolated and get into a rhythm of like a somewhat healthy daily structure, which will also help with grief stage number 8 of withdrawing from society. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, so I won't tell you to surround yourself with people if that won't help and if it stifles your emotions. But this awareness of stage 8 may help you avoid completely isolating yourself. So let yourself feel all the feels and reach out when you can. So I recently lost a close childhood family friend that right now, as of the filming of this video, I'm about to attend his memorial this weekend on Sunday. And for him, I called my aunt and my cousin who knew him well and broke the news to them. And then I just had to get off the phone and just grieve on my own. Because to me, at that time of processing the shock, talking about it almost took away some of the intense emotions that I was feeling. I wasn't ready for like a casual conversation about the loss. So feel all the feels, reach out when you can, and try not to stay isolated for too long. And finally, stage number 9 is reaching acceptance. This does not mean being completely fine. It just means that you've realized what you lost and that there's a void in your life. You can start to fill that void with positive things that that person would want you to fill it with. It's one way to learn how to live with your loss. If anything, there's a beautiful reminder in there somewhere that life is impermanent and super fleeting, and you can spend time and energy on the deeply meaningful things that you deep down want to. So while these 9 stages of grief are outlined, there is no set amount of time for each stage. All the stages show up in any number of forms, in any order, and they happen on their own schedule, which is whenever. And the acceptance stage does not mean that it's over. Even still, this awareness of simply seeing the pieces of the grieving process and understanding that you're not alone in this human experience, these 9 stages of grief can be helpful to you and those that you love. If this video has been helpful, share it with others, subscribe and comment below the video. It might just be what someone else needs to see during a hard time. So thank you so much for being here. And if you need any kind of help, just reach out.